Disowned at 20, you're not family. Now I'm a millionaire and they beg for $75K. I still remember the exact moment my phone lit up after 7 years of silence. It was 2 a.m. I was standing barefoot on my penthouse balcony, champagne in hand from celebrating my firm's $20 million contract. The text was from my mother. "Sarah, we're desperate. We're about to lose everything. Please help." My laugh echoed across the Chicago skyline. At 20, they'd thrown me out like garbage when I wouldn't hand over my hard-earned college savings to rescue my brother's failing business. Now at 27, with my name on architecture magazines and a design firm grossing 8 figures, suddenly I was worth contacting again. I took a long sip of champagne, watching the city lights blur through unshed tears. Everyone thinks success is the best revenge, but what they don't tell you is that success also brings clarity, and with clarity comes power. I typed 4 words that would force my family to face what they'd done. Capitol Grill. Saturday. 7 p.m. Would I finally write that check they wanted? Or would I do something that would shock them more than my success ever could? The decision I made that night would redefine family for all of us. To understand why being thrown out was both devastating and liberating, you need to see the pattern that defined my childhood. In our family photos, we look picture perfect. Dad the tech executive, Mom the kindergarten teacher, Michael the golden boy, and me, Sarah, the afterthought. You wouldn't see that my parents canceled my 10th birthday party the morning of because a college scout was coming to Michael's football game. "We'll celebrate next weekend," my mother promised as I sat in the bleachers for 4 hours, watching my ice cream cake melt in the car. That weekend never came. Also, you wouldn't see that Michael's B+ grades earned lavish dinners out, while my straight A's were met with, "That's what we expect from you." My achievements weren't celebrated, they were assumed. His mediocrity was rewarded. The message was clear, he was special. I was just there. The worst moment? My high school graduation. I was valedictorian, giving a speech I'd worked on for weeks. My parents arrived late and left early for Michael's baseball practice. I overheard my father tell our neighbor, "Michael's the one with real potential. Sarah just works hard." As if determination was somehow less valuable than natural talent. While other teens hung out at the mall, I started working at 16. By 19, I'd saved $45,000 for college through endless shifts at a coffee shop and weekend waitressing. No one helped me, not with college applications, not with tuition. I'd figured out early that if I wanted anything in life, I'd have to get it myself. When Northwestern accepted me to their architecture program with a partial scholarship, my parents barely glanced at the letter before changing the subject to Michael's latest football game. That same month, they threw a party when he got into Boston College, with grades so mediocre he barely made the cut. What they didn't realize was that I was keeping score. Every slight, every dismissal, every time they chose him over me, I filed it away. Not out of bitterness, but because someday I knew this inventory of injustice would matter. I just didn't know how soon. The summer before I was supposed to leave for Chicago, everything imploded. Michael, halfway through college, announced he was dropping out to launch a tech startup. You'd think he'd discovered the cure for cancer from my parents' reaction. The next Mark Zuckerberg, my father bragged to neighbors, colleagues, anyone who would listen. Within weeks, they liquidated $70,000 from their retirement accounts to fund Michael's revolutionary social media platform. At dinner one night, I cautiously asked about his business plan. "What do you know about business?" Michael sneered across the table. My father's face darkened like a storm cloud. "Stop being jealous of your brother's success," he snapped. Under the table, my mother squeezed my knee, her silent signal to keep quiet and keep the peace. 8 months later, reality hit. The startup crashed spectacularly. There was no product, barely any code written, but somehow Michael had burned through $70,000 on luxury offices, a BMW, and hiring his friends as consultants, who produced nothing. I was packing for college, my tuition deposit paid, my tiny Chicago apartment secured, when my mother appeared in my doorway with that tight smile that always preceded bad news. "Family meeting downstairs," she said quietly. In our formal dining room, reserved for Thanksgiving and difficult conversations, my parents and Michael sat waiting. The air felt charged with a decision that had already been made without me. "Sarah," my father began with unnatural formality, "your brother is going through a difficult period. His business had tremendous potential, but timing is everything in tech. He needs another opportunity." I nodded cautiously, the knot in my stomach tightening. "We'd like you to defer college for a year," my mother said, eyes fixed on the tablecloth. "Michael has another business concept that shows real promise, but he needs initial capital." The room blurred as understanding crystallized. "You want me to give Michael my college savings? The money I've been working for since I was 16? "Not give," my father corrected sharply. "Invest. When Michael succeeds, the whole family benefits." Michael examined his manicured nails with practiced indifference. He hadn't worked a single day outside his failed venture. "I can't do that," I said, my voice barely audible. "I've worked too hard for this opportunity." My mother's face hardened in a way I'd never seen before. "Michael has the potential to make millions. You'll just be an architect drawing buildings that other people want." Before I could recover from this dismissal of my life's dream, my father delivered the final blow. "If you can't support your brother and your family in a time of need, perhaps you're not really part of this family." The words hung in the air like poison. I wasn't a daughter. I was a resource to be tapped when the golden child needed replenishing. "If that's how you feel," I said, my voice surprisingly steady, "then maybe I should leave." "Maybe you should," my father replied without hesitation. "You have 48 hours. I looked at each family member, waiting for someone to object. My mother stared at her hands. Michael examined the ceiling. My father's expression remained impassive. 2 days later, I loaded everything I owned into my used Honda Civic. No one helped me. No one tried to stop me. As I pulled away, I glanced in my rearview mirror. My father stood in the doorway with arms crossed. My mother peeked from behind the curtain. Michael was nowhere to be seen. I was 20 years old, alone and homeless. I had no idea that this devastating rejection would become the foundation of my entire empire. That first night in Chicago, I slept in my car in a Walmart parking lot because my apartment wasn't ready for 3 more days. I woke up to a police officer tapping on my window, telling me I couldn't stay there. That's when the reality hit me. I was completely on my own. I found a bedroom in a rundown apartment with 3 strangers in a neighborhood that made my mother's warnings about city living seem reasonable. My daily schedule became a marathon of survival. Opening a coffee shop at 5 a.m., rushing to classes, working an unpaid architecture internship, then bartending until 2 a.m. on weekends. November brought the lowest point. I couldn't afford both textbooks and heat. I sat in my freezing room, wrapped in every piece of clothing I owned, trying to read architecture theory by flashlight because I couldn't pay the electricity bill. That night, I cried until I had no tears left, then called home, something I hadn't done since leaving. The call went straight to voicemail, as it always did. That's when I realized they'd changed their number. The next day, instead of giving up, I walked into the university counseling center. The counselor suggested a support group for students estranged from their families. Walking into that first meeting felt like admitting defeat. Instead, it became my salvation. These strangers understood my pain without explanation. "Your family didn't fail to love you," said Maya, a senior who hadn't spoken to her parents in 3 years. "They failed to see you. There's a difference." My breakthrough came after receiving an A on a design project I'd poured myself into. I tried calling home one last time, still desperate to share my success with someone who was supposed to care. When I hit the number no longer in service message again, I collapsed on my bed sobbing. Between gasps, a realization hit me. I wasn't crying because I missed my family. I was crying because I was still trying to earn their love. I sat up, wiped my tears, and spoke aloud to my empty room. I am enough. I've always been enough. Something shifted inside me that night, the beginning of real healing. I would no longer live for their approval. The next day, I approached Professor Eleanor Hayes, a legendary architect known for her brutal criticism and brilliant designs. "I want to learn everything you can teach me," I told her, standing awkwardly in her office doorway. "I'll work harder than anyone else." She studied me critically. "What makes you think you have what it takes in this industry?" "Because I've already lost everything once," I answered without hesitation. "I have nothing to lose and everything to build." She nodded once, then handed me a stack of blueprints. "Start by correcting the flaws in these student projects. If you can identify what doesn't work, you'll understand what does." That small vote of confidence changed everything. Within a year, I'd won my first design competition, a sustainable bus shelter that could be replicated cheaply across urban areas. The prize wasn't huge, but it was enough for a down payment on a tiny studio apartment with questionable plumbing and magical light. Standing alone with the keys, I whispered, "No one can take this from me." It wasn't much, but it was mine. The first piece of the empire I would build from nothing but determination and talent that had been dismissed as just hard work. I'll fast forward 4 years. By 26, I had established Mitchell Design, specializing in sustainable urban architecture. My breakthrough came when I redesigned an abandoned factory into mixed-use housing that preserved historical elements while incorporating cutting-edge sustainability features. When Architectural Digest featured it on their cover with the headline, "The Future of Urban Renewal," everything changed overnight. Clients who had ignored my calls were suddenly blowing up my phone. Developers who had dismissed my ideas as too progressive were begging for meetings. My signature became transforming overlooked spaces into vibrant environments, perhaps because I understood intimately how something discarded could contain hidden potential. My approach was different because I designed buildings like someone who had once been homeless, with awareness of how spaces could either welcome or reject people. I insisted that affordable housing be beautiful, not just functional. That public spaces encourage community, not just traffic flow. That sustainability wasn't a luxury add-on, but a fundamental right. As the firm expanded to Seattle and Boston, I moved into a penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan. My staff grew to 30, then 50, then over 100. Each building we created reflected my core belief that everyone deserves beauty and dignity in their surroundings, regardless of their bank account. I built a chosen family of friends, mentors, and colleagues who showed up in all the ways my biological family had failed to do. We celebrated holidays together, supported each other through crises, shared triumphs and disappointments. These relationships weren't conditional on performance or compliance. They were maintained through mutual respect and genuine care. I established a foundation providing scholarships to architecture students from challenging backgrounds. When asked why in interviews, I'd simply say, "Everyone deserves a chance to build something beautiful." I never mentioned my family. I didn't need to. Then came the message that shattered my carefully constructed new life. After bumping into an old neighbor who mentioned my parents had lost their house, I received that 2 a.m. text from my mother. "Sarah, we need your help. Michael's business failed again. We might lose everything." 7 years of silence, and now they wanted money. The amount? $75,000, almost exactly what I'd saved for college. The symmetry was almost poetic. That night, pacing my penthouse, I realized this wasn't about revenge. This was about something more important: closure, and possibly, if I was honest with myself, answers to questions that had haunted me for 7 years. I arrived at the Capitol Grill 30 minutes early, selecting a table with perfect sightlines to the entrance. When they walked in, the shock was visible on both sides. My parents had aged dramatically. My father's commanding presence had diminished to a cautious shuffle. My mother looked smaller somehow, her shoulders curved inward as if perpetually bracing for impact. Michael appeared superficially the same, still handsome, still well-dressed, but with a haunted quality in his eyes I didn't remember. They spotted me, freezing momentarily. My mother stepped forward, arms outstretched. "Sarah." I stood but didn't embrace her, offering a handshake instead. The hurt in her eyes was evident, but I maintained my composure as they took their seats. I ordered an expensive bottle of wine without checking the price, a small detail my penny-pinching father couldn't help but notice. His eyes widened slightly as the waiter departed. "So," I said after our glasses were filled, "tell me what's happening." My mother launched into a carefully edited version of the past 7 years. Michael's failed businesses were described as promising but ahead of their time. My father's early retirement became necessary due to health issues. The loss of their home was attributed to market downturns, not poor financial decisions. I listened silently, noting the significant omissions, no mention of my abrupt departure, no acknowledgement of the family fracture. When she finished, I turned to Michael. "And what are you doing now?" I asked. "I'm consulting," he mumbled vaguely. "I have some investors interested in my latest concept." Translation: unemployed. I nodded, recognizing the familiar pattern of vague business jargon covering a lack of concrete progress. "And how much do you need?" I asked, turning back to my parents. My father cleared his throat. 75,000 would clear the immediate debts and give us some breathing room. "I see," I replied. "And why come to me after 7 years of no contact?" The table fell silent. My mother looked down at her plate. My father straightened defensively. "We've always treated both our children equally," he said firmly. "We gave you and Michael the same opportunities." I couldn't help it. I laughed. The sound was sharp in the quiet restaurant. "Equally?" I repeated. I reached into my bag and pulled out a small leather-bound notebook. "I've kept records since I was 14. Would you like to know what I found?" Without waiting for an answer, I opened the book. Michael received 5 times the financial support I did from ages 14 to 21. 5 times, despite my higher academic achievements. He received a new car for graduation. I received a watch. His college tuition was paid in full. I worked 3 jobs. My father's face reddened. "That's not—" "It is," I interrupted calmly. I counted every dollar. I recorded every gift, every opportunity, every time his failures were forgiven while my successes were ignored. I turned to my mother. "You canceled my 16th birthday party because Michael had a football game. Do you remember what you said when I cried? Don't be selfish, Sarah. This scout could be Michael's future." My mother's eyes filled with tears. "We didn't realize—" "You did," I said softly. "You just didn't care. I wasn't the child you valued." Michael scoffed. "So this is your revenge? Flaunting your success while we're struggling? Real mature, Sarah." I turned to him, maintaining my composure. "This isn't revenge, Michael. This is consequence. You're 32 years old and have never held a job that wasn't funded by our parents. You've had multiple chances and you've squandered everyone. Why would this time be different?" "You don't know anything about business," he snapped. "Sometimes you have to take risks." "I run a multi-million-dollar architecture firm," I replied evenly. "I know quite a bit about business. The difference is, I built mine without exploiting anyone's love." My father pushed his chair back slightly. "If you're just here to throw our mistakes in our faces—" "I'm here because you asked for my help," I interrupted. "And I've decided to offer it, but not in the way you expected." I laid out my proposal. I wouldn't give them $75,000 outright. Instead, I would offer Michael a legitimate job as an office manager at my Chicago firm. I would help my parents restructure their debt and find affordable housing, but only if they agreed to family counseling. I won't enable the same dynamic that destroyed our family 7 years ago, I explained. But I will help you build something healthier if you're willing to do the work. The silence that followed was deafening. My father's face had turned to stone. My mother looked torn between hope and pride. Michael pushed his chair back violently. "This is bullshit," he said loudly. "She's just trying to control us because she finally has some money. I'm not working for my little sister like some charity case." He stormed out, leaving his half-eaten meal behind. My father watched him go, then turned to me with cold eyes. "You haven't changed," he said. "Still thinking you know better than everyone else." "You're right about one thing," I replied. "I do know better than to keep making the same mistake. Family isn't DNA. Family is people who stand by you when things fall apart, not people who push you into the storm." My mother reached across the table toward my hand, but stopped short of touching me. "Sarah, please, we need this help." "My offer stands," I said gently, "but I won't simply write a check that enables Michael's behavior and your enabling of him. That's not help, it's harm." My father stood up. "Come on, Lisa. She's made her choice clear." My mother hesitated, torn between her husband and daughter. In the end, she rose slowly and followed him. At the door, she turned back to look at me one last time, her expression a complex mixture of regret and resentment. As they disappeared, I expected to feel anger or vindication. Instead, a profound peace washed over me. For years, I had carried the weight of their rejection, questioning my worth. Now I understood with perfect clarity that nothing would have been enough. The problem had never been me. I paid the bill and walked into the Boston evening, finally free of the need for their approval. The irony wasn't lost on me. In seeking $75,000 from me, they had given me something worth infinitely more, liberation from the hope that they would ever see my true value. 6 weeks after the restaurant confrontation, my office phone rang with an unfamiliar number. I almost didn't answer. When I did, the voice on the other end caught me completely off guard. "Sarah? It's Mom." I remained silent, waiting. "I left your father," she said without preamble. "I'm staying with my sister in Vermont." She'd been seeing a therapist who had helped her recognize the family's dysfunctional patterns. Her voice cracked as she continued. "After you left that night, I couldn't stop thinking about your notebook. All those instances you recorded. I started remembering other moments too." The therapist had pointed out that she'd been complicit in creating a family system that sacrificed one child's needs for another's. "I favored Michael because that's what your father expected," she admitted. "That's not an excuse, just the painful truth. I failed you and no apology can erase that hurt." Our reconciliation was cautious and incremental. We started with occasional emails, then progressed to monthly phone calls. I maintained clear boundaries, no discussions of financial assistance, no pressure to reconnect with my father or brother, no expectations of instant forgiveness. 6 months later, I agreed to meet her for lunch during a business trip to Burlington. The woman who greeted me looked both familiar and foreign, my mother, but softer somehow, less defended. "I thought being a good mother meant supporting your father's decisions," she confessed over coffee. "I was raised to believe that family unity meant one voice, the father's. I see now how wrong that was." She had gotten a part-time job at a local bookstore, was taking community college classes, and had joined a support group for women starting over after 60. Watching her describe her new life with tentative pride, I glimpsed the woman who might have existed if she hadn't surrendered her identity to my father's expectations. Meanwhile, my professional life soared to new heights. Mitchell Design won the competition to create Chicago's first carbon-negative community center. I expanded our scholarship foundation to support more students from challenging backgrounds, and I met David, a landscape architect whose parents had rejected him for being gay. On our third date, walking along Lake Michigan, he said something that resonated deeply. Sometimes I still catch myself trying to design a life they would approve of. Oh, with David, I discovered what love should be, based on mutual respect and appreciation rather than conditional approval. He saw me completely, including the parts I'd tried to hide from others, the lingering insecurity, the workaholic tendencies born of trying to prove my worth, the fear that success could disappear as quickly as it had come. My father remained distant, still unable to acknowledge the favoritism that had fractured our family. Michael continued blaming everyone but himself for his failures. I accepted that some relationships couldn't and shouldn't be repaired and focused my energy on those that could grow in healthy soil. Last spring, I gave a keynote address at a conference on mental health and family dynamics. Standing at the podium, looking out at hundreds of faces, I shared my story publicly for the first time. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is set boundaries, I told the audience. Sometimes the most difficult lesson is learning that you cannot change others. You can only change how you respond to them. And sometimes, the family that nurtures you isn't the one you were born into, but the one you carefully, intentionally build along the way. After the talk, a young woman approached me, tears streaming down her face. "My parents kicked me out last year when I wouldn't give them my scholarship money," she said. "I've been couch surfing and working 2 jobs while trying to stay in school. I thought I was alone." I looked into her eyes and saw my younger self, scared, hurt, wondering if she would ever be enough. I took out a business card and wrote my personal number on the back. "You're not alone," I told her, "and your worth isn't determined by whether your family could see it. You deserve support simply because you exist." That night, I created the Rebuilding Fund, providing emergency assistance and stable housing for young adults estranged from their families due to financial exploitation. The day we housed our first student was the day I truly understood that pain, when transformed, becomes power. Today, as I sign the papers on our firm's biggest project yet, a sustainable community center that will bear my name, I realize that my parents' rejection was the most valuable gift they could have given me. Being disowned forced me to claim myself completely. It stripped away the possibility of relying on anyone else's vision for my life. It taught me that family isn't about blood. It's about who stays when everyone else walks away. The buildings I design stand as testaments to resilience and vision. Each one contains elements that others overlooked or discarded, historical features preserved rather than demolished, materials repurposed rather than wasted. My specialty has become seeing potential where others see nothing worth saving. My mother visits occasionally now. Last month, she attended the groundbreaking ceremony for my latest project. As we stood side by side, hard hats on, she whispered, "I'm so proud of what you've built." The words I'd waited a lifetime to hear felt different than I'd imagined. Welcome, but no longer necessary for my sense of worth. The greatest revenge isn't success or money. It's not even forgiveness. The greatest revenge is building a life so authentic that you no longer need the approval of those who hurt you. If your family has ever made you feel like you're not enough, like you're the second choice, or like your dreams don't matter, I want you to know this. The very qualities they dismiss in you might be your greatest strengths. The very dreams they belittle might be your unique contribution to the world. Comment below with 3 words that describe how you felt when someone underestimated you. Tag a person who believed in you when others didn't. This video is for anyone who needs to hear that rejection isn't the end of their story. It might just be the beginning of something extraordinary. Remember, sometimes being pushed away from what feels like home is life's way of pushing you toward where you truly belong. I'm Sarah Mitchell, and my family's betrayal built my empire.